On the last episode of our Mega Build series, I talked about the Marineland 265-gallon Corner-Flo Aquarium, the Monterey cabinet, and the Monterey canopy that goes with it, and why I chose these particular items to be my personal aquarium at home. Now, on this episode, I want to talk to you about what we're going to be doing for filtration for this beast of an aquarium, and I'm sure it's no surprise that, given that there's two overflows on this thing, I'm going to be using a sump. But before I get into the details of what sump I'm going to use on this tank, let me show you what I've been up to this weekend. So let's get under the hood and take a look at the plumbing. When it comes to plumbing your aquarium and your sump, you could go two different routes. You could either go primarily hard plumbing, which is typically PVC, or primarily soft plumbing, which is usually vinyl or silicone tubing. In my case, I decided to go with hard plumbing. And the reason that is hard plumbing is more permanent, it's a cleaner look, and it's really robust, and it will last the life of the aquarium, if not longer. So those are great pros. Now, the complications with using hard plumbing is that you have to be a lot more precise with your measurements, making sure everything fits together properly. There's a lot more connections that you're actually gonna have to put together, and that means there's more points of failure when you're setting it up, whether you're gluing it or screwing it together. You can make a mistake, and that mistake means, in a lot of cases, scrapping everything and starting again. Now, like I said, it's much more permanent, so once it's in there, it's a lot harder to change out. There are ways around that. So what I do is I always put unions directly under the bulkhead so that if I need to, for any reason, take the plumbing off of the aquarium, I can do it without cutting it off. And once you cut it off, that means you gotta glue something back together if you even have the space. But with unions, I can just unscrew it, get rid of what I don't need or repair it, and then screw it back in. And if I do need to put something new in, I can just buy a new union and use the male side of the union with the female adapter that's already on the bottom of the tank. Now, there is one other way around that, and that's to use threaded fittings instead of the slit PVC fittings that have to get glued together. The threaded PVC fittings screw together, and with a little bit of plumber's tape in between, they don't leak. So you can do your whole system that way if you want. However, I've only done it right here where the barb is that connects to whatever pump I decide to put in here for the sump. This barb, if it doesn't fit the pump that I've got, I can just swap it out so that it matches, and then I can run the piece of tubing between no problem. I've used pink plumber's tape because that's what my store had in stock, and it said it was for water. Another issue some people have with hard plumbing is that if they plumb everything, including the pumps, directly to hard plumbing, it creates vibrations that carry through the stand and sometimes even the aquarium, causing a loud hum coming from the whole system, and that's not something you want. So my remedy for that is to always use soft plumbing between the pumps and the hard plumbing. I do the same thing on the drain end so that the drain lines going to the sump, where the water's rushing into the sump, are also soft. So any vibration will be lost there as well. That way it doesn't carry through the system. So I've decided to keep the plumbing for this build pretty simple, and it's very much the way the tank was designed to be set up with this plumbing. You could plumb the tank a different way if you wanted to, but I wanted to keep things simple and straightforward, so that's why I've done it like this. Even though it might look complicated, it's really not. Under each overflow, there's two bulkheads, one for a return and one for a drain. So I've got a drain and return on each side. Underneath each bulkhead, I've stuck a ball valve, and that ball valve is there so I can either shut off the water during maintenance, or I can even just dolly back the flow from the pump on one side or the other side of the aquarium. That way I can either direct the water or slow it down a bit if it's too much water for this overflow system. From there, you'll notice that I've actually got hangers on the piping. That's because when the piping is full of water, it's gonna weigh itself down, and you don't want that weight being put on the bulkhead or the rest of the piping. That could cause a crack somewhere along the line, or worst off, crack right at the bulkhead, which is gonna lead to a leak. So it's really important you support the piping, and that's what I've done here. And this way, I shouldn't run into any issues with the weight of the water inside of that pipe. Although you can't tell it without the sump being under the stand, I've actually plumbed the return so that the hookup for the return line from the pump is gonna be poking right down into the section of the sump where the pump's gonna sit, so that's a nice straight connection for the pump. And because the sump has both of the drain lines on the same side of the sump, I've run the drain line from the aquarium all the way down to the other side of the stand so that they're hooking up in the exact same spot. So plumbing might not be fancy, but it's necessary, and therefore it must be. Now, there's technically two different positions I could put these lock line returns into. The ones that they're currently in, and I'll tell you why they're there in a second, or there's another spot here at the back. The reason I decided to put them at the front is because I actually feel they hide better against the black overflow. I haven't fully decided if the back of the tank is going to be black, if I'm going to use a colored background, or what I'm doing back there. But to keep them more out of sight, for my personal preference, I've stuck them over here at the front. So why did I want a sump? First, the tank obviously has overflows. I ordered it that way, and it's because I really like the surface extraction you get from an overflow system. The surface of the water is constantly pouring down the overflow, taking with it any of that oily film buildup that could be up there that prevents gas exchange and light penetration. So that way I know I'm gonna have great oxygen levels, and lighting my aquarium, if I ever do put plants or corals or anything in there, they're gonna get everything they can from those lights. And obviously with the overflow panels comes the sump. And sumps have some really great benefits. Like they increase the total water volume of your system, meaning there's more gallons of water in the system to dilute the waste of the fish that are in there. Sumps also provide a place to hide other equipment. Things like heaters or media reactors can go down into the sump where you don't have to see them on the aquarium, which would detract from the beauty of your tank and, just basically be ugly. Sumps are also completely customizable, meaning it's basically a box of water under the tank until you start adding media to it. And you can put whatever media you need in that sump to tailor it to the specific type of aquarium you have. So whether or not it's freshwater or saltwater, you can make sure that that sump is perfectly tuned for your fish's needs. And lastly, a sump is just a big filter. You can put a lot of media into that sump and it's going to work efficiently to make sure that your aquarium is going to be in tip-top shape. Big filtration is needed when you've got a monster aquarium that you don't know what you're putting in yet. But you can assume there's going to be a lot of whatever it is or a really big whatever it is. Therefore, sump. And now the unveiling of which sump I picked. After much deliberation, I landed on the ProClear Aquatic Systems Freedom Series 4-in-1 sumps. They're beautiful. It's the 300 model, so it's rated for up to 300 gallons. It can handle up to 1,200 gallons per hour into the sump and then across and back out. And it measures 37 inches long, 14.5 inches wide, and 16 inches tall. So it's a lot of sump for this tank. Although technically I could have gone bigger, I didn't want to utilize too much space under the stand in case I wanted to throw other things under there too. So out of all the options out there, why did I choose this sump? And there's a few reasons. Number one, starting at this end, the water entry system is designed to reduce microbubbles as well as noise, which is really important because I'm going to be spending a lot of time in this room and I don't want to hear the water coming into the sump if I don't have to. Number two, this has got a solid Euro brace all the way around the top of the sump. That's going to prevent any kind of bowing, meaning the sump's going to last a really long time. It's built solid. And number three, is actually a lot of different reasons because there's a real plethora of cool features that the sump has that I want to go over with you one by one. So let's dive into that. This model comes standard with 3 polishing filter socks, which means all the water coming from the tank into the sump is going to get polished perfectly before it travels through the rest of the sump so it doesn't bog up the other media and also so the tank water stays crystal clear. There's also a foam filter block right before the return pump so any debris that makes it through the sump or comes from the refugium section, if I do put a refugium in there, will get trapped and doesn't bog up the pump or make it back to the display. Now this is actually really cool because I haven't seen this before on any other models of sumps, but this particular model has a specialized channel behind the refugium section for chemical media, and it holds up to 3 of these chemical media cartridges. They slide open and you can easily put whatever kind of media you want in here, whether it's carbon or phosphate remover. You could even put biomedia if you wanted into these chambers. And then you slide them back in and the water's forced through them. The reason that's really cool and I was really drawn to that feature is because it prevents me from having to put on an external media reactor or an internal media reactor that would require a separate pump. Because if I don't have to put extra pumps into this system, that means I have less pumps to clean monthly and I don't have to waste energy on pumps running in the tank that don't need to be there. And in order to control the amount of flow that goes through the refugium or through the chemical media channel, they've provided an adjustable flow gate so you can either raise or lower it to divide the flow. Another really useful feature that comes with this sump is a probe holder. Usually you'd have to purchase something like that separately, but this one's built right in. And the nice thing is right above the probe holder, in the actual Euro brace, they've cut notches so that the wires from the probes are held nicely in place, nice and clean, and they also have slots drilled so that if you're going to use dosing systems at all, those tubes from the dosing system will go straight down right into the water where it needs to go and won't be floating around everywhere, and you don't even have to use suction cups. The refugium section on this sump is a little bit unique in the sense that it can also double as a wet-dry setup. The reason I thought that was pretty good for this situation is because I haven't decided exactly what I'm doing with this tank. I don't know if it's fresh or salt. And for freshwater, I may actually want to go with that wet-dry setup, but for saltwater, I definitely want a refugium. This way, I've got both options. I can easily remove the bottom of the baffle, then put drip plates on the provided supports, fill it with biomedia, and it becomes a wet-dry system. It's very easily converted, which is great because maybe I'll start freshwater and then want to go saltwater and then want to switch back, and that's easy to do. Lastly, the return section is nice and big. I can put a monster pump in here if I want to. Now, the limit for this sump is 1,200 gallons per hour, and I know any 1,200 gallon per hour pump I'm going to want that's submersible is going to fit in there. And once again, in the Euro brace, in the trim, they've provided a hole for the return line, as well as a cord collector for the cord coming off the pump so things stay nice and clean. Now, ProClear builds these bad boys right in the USA and gives them a lifetime warranty, which is super important to me because if a company's willing to back something for life, I know that they have faith in their product. And when we're talking about the main piece of filtration for a big tank, knowing that I can get it replaced if need be is pretty important since that means my tank's covered. And I'm not gonna lie, I think the red, white, and blue is pretty slick. And now I think it's time to get this under the stand. So let's do that. Now, although I'm going to be adding all kinds of media, including biological, to the sump, so it could essentially filter this entire aquarium by itself, I'm still going to be adding another filter on there. And that's because I believe in redundancies and having backups and making sure that a tank crash is preventable as possible. That and the fact that I fully intend to overstock this tank with whatever I'm putting in there. It's just going to happen and I know it, so I might as well have more filtration. And the filter I picked is, funny enough, probably the heavyweight champion of suggestions from the comment section in the last video, and that is none other than the Fluval FX6. This filter's a beast. Fluval rates their FX6 for up to 400 gallons, and it pushes 925 gallons per hour of flow. So this filter on its own, in theory, could definitely run this tank, even if it's overstocked, for a little while the sump gets serviced. And vice versa. If this goes down, the sump's still good. The sump goes down, this still good. Either way, we're still good, which is kind of super important because your livestock is more than just money swimming in the tank. You know, you get attached to your fish, and you want to make sure that nothing can happen to them. We already have a comprehensive video review of the FX4, so I'm not going to go into too much detail of the functionality of the FX6. You can just check that out in the description below. What I will tell you is that this is a lot of filter for the price, which is essentially why I went with this filter. That and the fact that I know all the parts, if anything should go wrong, are available for purchase, so I know I can get parts for it if I need them. Filtration is officially all hooked up on this tank. We've got the Freedom 4-in-1 sump under there along with the Fluval FX6. I haven't put any media in the sump yet because I'm gonna choose the media based on what livestock's going in, and I'm not sure what's going in yet, so I'll show you guys that later. I will also show you what circulation pump I put on this tank in a future episode regarding circulation. But if you have any questions regarding the filtration we've chosen for this aquarium, feel free to drop that down in the comments section below. I'd love to talk to you guys about it. And check out our next episode in the Mega Build series because it's going to be on lighting. And I have no idea what light I'm going to stick on here yet, which is going to be difficult to choose when I don't even know what livestock I'm putting in it because I don't know if I've got plants going in there or corals and if I need a light for those or if it's just going to be fish. Who knows? Maybe I'll just go overkill on the lighting and dial it back if I have to. If you guys have any comments or suggestions for what lighting I should get, throw those out there and maybe I'll consider them too. Now, as I leave you with these beauty shots of the aquarium, don't forget to subscribe because we're going to have new videos coming out every week. Also, check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And as always, you gotta keep on tanking.